Hi, and a really warm welcome to today. My name's Chris Watson from Endor Learn Develop. And today we're going to be exploring beliefs around people's capacity to learn and grow. In particular, how the adoption of a growth mindset can help you to transform performance. Welcome aboard. I can't hear you, Imral. It's always the same with the techie guys, isn't it?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yeah. Welcome aboard. Good to see you.
Apologies about the delay. I made a schoolboy error and I didn't put the meeting in my calendar.
Ah, no worries. Yeah. Attention to detail. I'm making cryptic notes as we talk. Thinking, right. Fantastic. And what's the one thing that your colleagues don't know about you, would you say? Was the one thing that they'd be surprised to find out?
I have to be careful what I say here, don't I, Stu?
Think wisely.
One thing they don't know about me, I think I'm like an open book. I think everyone knows everything about me, don't you, Carl? I think the one thing I probably would have said crypto, but again, everybody knows everything about that one as well.
Right, you're a cryptocurrency guy, are you?
I am, yeah. So kind of like Bitcoin and stuff like that.
Right.
Being in IT, being in the geeky kind of stuff, I kind of got in early when Bitcoin came out with the blockchain technology.
Fantastic. Oh, well, getting in early, I bet, was an advantage.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just the technology, really, a bit like the internet. I was a bit too young when the internet came out, but with the blockchain technology coming out, kind of saw the same kind of impact it would have on businesses, not just businesses, but all of the world, really. Still an immature technology. It'll take time for adoption, but I think it'll be as big as the internet. So I try to keep up with stuff like that, as well as other technological things, really, like a bit like quantum computing, what's happening with that space. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. Gives me a good flavour and actually fits in very nicely with today in terms of grabbing and taking advantage of new opportunities, about a sort of a mindset that is open to new possibilities. So I think you're going to find a lot of today very relevant, Imral, and I hope everyone else. Welcome to Wes. Before I do start, I was just sort of saying to Stuart and Andy and Carl about I'm quite excited actually about today as a subject area, because it's quite different to some of the things that we've done previously, but it was obviously initiated by yourself. And if would you mind just sort of sharing what your drivers were for focusing on something like growth mindset?
Yeah. So basically, for me, with me being still quite new to the business, what I'd found early on was obviously speaking to all the guys on the call now, and working with the guys now for 8-9 months. It was apparent that you've all got the capacity to do really good things, and from my point of view, I'm used to people being able to think and as managers manage your teams in a free way. So to be fair, some of it selfishly from my point of view is to get you guys to be able to and unlock that potential that you've got even more, to be able to really drive your teams and drive the business forward. So that's the reason, Chris, why I had a chat with yourself, was to help us unlock that and help the guys to unlock their potential by opening, being able to think rather than the old, just get it done, guys, just get it done, do this, don't ask. Actually, here you go, and here's some tools maybe that you guys can use moving forward to unlock the potential and then eventually make it so it's normal.
In terms of the way we're going to do this, I need to just make sure everyone's comfortable with the term and what we mean by this notion of a growth mindset. We'll see some of the advantages, but also some of the issues around this. Why mindset matters. We're actually even going to have a look back through the year and talk about your experience of COVID, bizarrely. And then I'm going to give you some hard evidence as to why this really will help you. We'll also then open it up to the broader picture, and we'll have a look at your teams, and we'll have a look at the wider culture and some of the requirements for this to work in terms of the organizational needs. What I do want to emphasize, though, perversely, for someone who's really passionate about skills, is that this isn't actually about skills at all. That said, here are 10 currencies that are deemed to be valuable for each of your roles. I'd like you to write down one thing that you think you've always been pretty good at. Brilliant. Second part of this, there's no judgment. One thing that you feel that you're probably never going to be as good at. Anyone comfortable just sharing their 2 items?
Yeah, I'll go, sir. Things I think I'm good at, or the one thing I think I've always been good at is delivering results through actions. And I think the thing that I'm probably never going to be as good at is probably the creative thinking. I think you've got to have a different type of way of thinking to be creative.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Stu. Imral, I'm going to be directive actually, rather than ask anyone else, just to sort of pull you in a little bit, because I'm very curious. Which 2 did you pick?
I'd say I'm good at organization, so I like everything I do, whether it's a professional life or personal life. I try to make sure it's organized. What I'm not good at is I'm still trying to think, Chris, to be fair, without being big-headed. I'm trying to think, because there's lots of things I'm not good at, and I think if it's not work related, then maybe one of those things could be basketball. And I don't think I'll ever be good at basketball because I'm quite a small guy.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll stick with that. I won't force the issue, but basketball, funnily enough, is about to raise its beautiful head. So we'll maybe pick up on how I can get you to improve at that.
Excellent.
Bear in mind what you've written there, because I'm going to come back to each of you as we move through the rest of the session. Here's another question for you, though. Which of these 3 items would you say contributes most to success? What would you say, Carl?
Hard work.
Hard work. Good answer. Yeah, Andy?
Persistence.
Persistence. Yeah, they're all pretty good, these, and often cited as the thing that differentiates superior performance. In fact, the truth is they're all byproducts of something else. Research demonstrates that when we try to develop things like grit or persistence, it's not nearly as important as the mindset that underlies them. So why mindset then? Why are we going to look at that? The great news about mindset is nothing to do with personality. Mindset isn't even innate. Some people don't sort of get born with a fantastic mindset and others not. It's actually a choice. So the book really does stop with each of us, rather than be because I came from a poor background or I haven't got a degree or whatever it is. Now, there's 2 terms around growth mindsets. There is a growth mindset, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's something called a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset, as it's got here, you'll never recognize it just by looking at someone. But with a fixed mindset, it manifests in this way. Skills and intelligence are believed to be set. They're not built or developed. You either have them or you don't. So skills are born. And talent is what creates success. And there are many people that definitely believe this, and as a result, have more of a fixed mindset. Some people are just naturally good or talented at things, and others aren't. Now, conversely, look at that.
Nice.
It wasn't that impressive. With a growth mindset, skills and intelligence are fluid, so they're grown and can be developed. And people who are good at things are good because they've put energy and effort into developing that ability. Now, this actually links a little bit to something like Stephen Covey and the first habit of being proactive. It's about taking ownership for your own professional, personal development, and growth, therefore, requires effort. The sort of implication is that talent can be developed, but it does require a willingness to do so, and also requires feedback from others. And we'll look at both of those. But just to see whether or not you can differentiate, and this isn't a hard exercise, I assure you.
Nobody knows more about taxes than I do, and income than I do.
Nobody knows more about construction than I do.
Nobody knows more about campaign finance than I do.
I know more about drones than anybody.
Nobody knows much more about technology, this type of technology, certainly, than I do.
Nobody knows more about technology than me.
Nobody in the history of this country has ever known so much about infrastructure as Donald Trump. I know the H-1B, I know the H-2B. Nobody knows it better than me.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me. I understand things. I comprehend very well, okay? Better than, I think, almost anybody.
And by the way, who knew the other side of the picture better than me? I knew it.
Nobody knows more about environmental impact statements than me.
I understand the power of Facebook, maybe better than almost anybody.
I know more about renewables than any human being on Earth. Nobody knows more about polls than me. I know more about courts than any human being on Earth.
I know more about steelworkers than anybody that's ever run for office.
And I'll stop there because it goes on and on and on, and it's relentless. So any guesses? Do you think more of a fixed or more of a growth mindset?
You say that's a fixed, Chris?
I think you've won the bonus point there. There's someone called Carol Dweck, and I'll introduce you to some of her stuff later on, but Carol Dweck is probably the greatest authority on growth mindset and coined the term as well. She's a Stanford professor. And what she said is that if you take two people, and bear this in mind, when you're interviewing particularly, you take two people, you've got the know-it-all and you've got the learn-it-all. And in that situation, the learn-it-all will consistently triumph and will always trump, forgive the pun, but trump the know-it-all. And here's the rub. Even when the learn-it-all starts off with a lower innate ability. Well, let's look at someone that might have a different sort of mindset.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
So Michael Jordan, heralded as the greatest basketball player on the planet, and 2014, the first ever billionaire basketball player, and very passionate about things like growth mindset and this notion that actually a lot of the learning, a lot of the growth comes through getting things wrong. Some people would rather be right than be successful. And I know anyone that's done some coaching with me, Stuart and Carl, will have heard that saying before, but it's true. Some people would rather be right than be successful. No coincidence as well that in 2012, the US women's volleyball team brought in a coach to coach them on growth mindsets. And within 2 years, after never winning a championship, they were the national champions in 2014 based on some of the principles that they'd picked up. Where does the beginnings of a different mindset come from, though? So on one side, which is the fixed mindset on the left of your screen, is driven from not wanting to look bad. Now, if that's the case, actually everything becomes a bit more competitive. You compare your performance to other managers or to other people around the board table. So the driver is to look smart. The driver is to be right. The driver is to come up with the right answer. Now, a growth mindset actually comes from somewhere slightly different. The driver is for me to improve, for me to grow, for me to develop, for me to expand my knowledge base, for me to perform better than I previously have done. Come up with some issues with the model shortly, but my biggest problem with it is that whenever you read anything about it, whenever you see it on the web, if you look up growth mindset, it's very much represented as an either or. You're either one or the other. And I would say the reality is much more complex than that. And in reality, it's more of a continuum. And you may be more towards growth or more towards the other, but there will be situations, maybe if you're in front of someone that intimidates you or whatever, and you feel more wobbly, that you might become more orientated to, being driven by not wanting to look bad or wanting to prove and demonstrate your capability and competence. And then you sort of gradually come back to your normal states. It really is hard initially to work out whether the person that's in front of you or some of your teammates or colleagues or people that report to you have a fixed or growth mindset. However, what you might see is how that manifests in the workplace. And these are 5 areas you could concentrate on to try to come to some conclusions as to whether or not some of your team members have more growth or more fixed orientation. And these 5 areas are things like focus, their area of focus, effort, their responses to having to put in efforts, how they deal with challenges, how they respond to mistakes at work, and also around their reactions to feedback from you and others. So as it's got here with the fixed mindset, the area of focus is this driver to look smart and demonstrate their ability. Then actually I'm more likely to feel threatened by the success of others. Conversely, if my driver is to learn, to develop and improve, so I'm comparing myself just to myself, then actually I can see those incremental steps, and I gain satisfaction from that personal movement and not from comparing myself to people in the team. If we look at effort, if it's all about having innate talent at the back of someone's mind, I'd have to put a lot of effort into it, and the implication is that actually that's going to be unpleasant. And that contrasts with a growth mindset where actually effort is seen as a requirement to getting better at things. I know it's going to be an effort, but actually it's the only way I'm going to improve in this. If we look at challenges, fixed mindset will therefore avoid challenges because they know that they might not perform as well. It's going to be unfamiliar, so they'll see it as a threat. Conversely, the growth mindset see it's more of an opportunity to grow. With mistakes, for the same reason, fixed mindset will actually avoid them or conceal them because it's seen as a failing. May even, because of the competitive nature of a fixed mindset, blame other people to elevate their own performance and make them look better. A truly growth mindset culture would actually be more tolerant of mistakes. You still look to minimize them. Obviously, that's about continual improvements, but you accept them as part of the learning, but they're regarded more of a wake-up call and an area to focus on to make sure this doesn't happen again. But it's not about individual blame. And then finally, for all of these reasons, feedback for a fixed mindset is often regarded as personal, i.e. more of a threat, because it's undermining maybe the reputation or what people might think about my abilities. And so people will get defensive, or conversely with the growth mindset, they'll use feedback as a brilliant opportunity to get some outside in thinking. Feedback is more detached. It's not about me as an individual. It's about how I went about it. Really good sort of summary that, I think, in terms of starting to differentiate between approaches and some of the rationale and reasoning behind what you see in terms of people's different approaches. If you're more of a visual thinker, this highlights the 2 dimensions that influence what you see. So on the left, it's where people put their focus. Is it on purely performance, i.e. the results, or is it on progress and the process to get those results? So as much about the journey. and about their beliefs about learning, whether or not learning is not worthwhile because they already know this, or is it that learning is seen as the way that they'll move forward, the way that, you know, they'll improve their own performance, and so it's worthwhile. It's all very well understanding what we mean by growth and fixed mindsets. What's the advantages of adopting? Well, I'm not going to totally dismiss fixed mindsets. It's fine if you want expertise around the current way of doing things based on previous business requirements. That's significant, because in today's fast-moving world, I would say, you know, even that isn't satisfactory, because other companies are adapting, other companies are evolving, other managers are getting better and improving and learning new skills and so forth. So either organizationally or individually, you end up falling behind. With a growth mindset, the focus is much more about building capability to adapt and to flex in order to meet the emerging and future needs of the business. So this notion is more forward facing. And what you see really is that within the growth mindset, challenges are seen as exciting rather than threatening. All of this is fine, but what the challenge can sometimes be that for all of us, it's very difficult to consistently apply. You know, very few people, when there's problem after problem after problem, are going to say, wow, here's yet another opportunity for me to grow. So how you achieve this can be problematic. And I think especially if the wider culture doesn't support a growth mindset. I do want to mention, though, as well, about how transformational it can be. Anyone know who this is? Film recently about him called Searching for Bobby Fischer. Get the opportunity. It sounds boring as anything, but do watch it, because you think, well, here's a film about a chess champion. Doesn't sound the most thrilling ride of your life, but I guarantee you'll enjoy it. But this is a guy called Josh Waitkin, someone who's really passionate about growth mindset. He was a chess prodigy whose singular goal was to beat Bobby Fischer, the renowned international chess champion, and worked really hard and developed through something called deliberate practice the ability to be able to do that. He became world chess champion at 21, but then decided to try to learn an entirely new discipline. Went into martial arts and applied all of the growth principles, how to learn, how to develop, and how to grow. And after lots of bruises, broken bones, and defeats, significantly lots of defeats, became a 2 times world martial arts champion, just by adhering to some of the principles that we're going to look at. His mantra is talent is not enough. So Josh Waitkin, the main principles were using this thing called deliberate practice, which we'll talk about, and really maximizing opportunities to get feedback in the moment. And here's a little quote from Waitkin in terms of his philosophy. The moment believes success is determined by an ingrained level of ability, think Donald Trump, we will be brittle in the face of adversity. And you watch Donald Trump in the face of adversity. You watch the clips of Donald Trump when he was clearly failing in the re-election poll. And he did become very brittle, very inflexible, very defensive. And then the blame game started. Couple of problems just to bear in mind, so I don't want to be too evangelical with this. One I've mentioned is that this isn't an either or. This is a continuum, so you may move back and forth a little bit. I think sometimes it's also very hard for us to admit that we may have a fixed mindset about certain things. And because of that, you're less inclined to address it. The other thing is that it's not really just about blind positivity. You know, let's all walk into work waving a flag and say, hey, everything's great, it's fantastic being here. So I don't think that will get you very far, and it might wind up everyone that works with you. So it's not about just giving praise to people either. It's working much, much smarter. It's about the type of praise that's provided, and it's obviously about mindset. It's about a desire and a willingness to try new things. It's about a desire to stretch yourself, but also about that sometimes uncomfortable situation to seek feedback from others. The other problem is that adopting a growth mindset doesn't make you smarter. All it does is open the door to getting smarter through this notion of deliberate practice. This year has been tough really for almost everyone. What I'd like to know from you is how much stress would you say you've experienced in the last year? Great, thank you for that. I'm going to come back to the results, but I'm going to use what you've written down there just to illustrate the significance of mindsets. I'm going to use some research as well to illustrate this. Stress gets, understandably, quite a bad press a lot of the time. Typical stress responses are here that you will be familiar with. It's the fight or flight responses. And when you perceive threats, the nervous system kicks in, releasing cortisol, stress hormones, and they fire at your body ready for fight or flight responses. So typically, you know, your heart beats faster, blood gets sent to the muscles. That just makes you stiff and less relaxed. Your chest muscles as well will tighten, and that makes it harder for you to breathe. So your heart's pounding faster, muscles are tightening, the breath, when you need more breath, you're less likely to get those deeper inhalations. So all of that is kind of compromising your ability physiologically to deal with whatever is causing the stress in the first place. So for some of these reasons, stress does get a bad press. But what's your experience of stress?
Everybody's levels of stress management are different. So what you may perceive as not a lot of stress could be a lot to somebody else. And it's sort of how you're able to manage the short bits before it becomes too much for you. And it's sort of knowing your boundary and then how you respond to that, as well as recognizing your triggers and stuff as well.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why organizationally, this is such a difficult area to effectively manage for all people at all times, because it's a very individualized response. So there is something here about different levels of pressure. The problem is establishing when that critical point where it tips into being an unreasonable amount of pressure, because that's when people are going to need support. And one thing we do know is that dotted line between well-being and burnout differs for all of us. What we have discovered is that resilience tends to be influenced by two dimensions. One is your personality. Some people do appear to be more resilient than others, but the biggest differentiator is attitudinal aspects, i.e. mindset. How much stress have you experienced? The reason I'm asking this, it's exactly the same question that 30,000 Americans were asked in a longitudinal study that took place over 8 years. And they were asked two questions, but the first of them was, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? And then what they did was they tracked the health of those individuals over the period of the study. Here's the bad news. Of the people who said that experienced a lot of stress in the last year, they had a 43% increased risk of dying. Now, that is statistically staggering. However, what I will say, and this is really important, is that there were these two elements to the inquiry. The second question that they asked was, do you believe stress is bad for your health? I think you can imagine where this is going, but I would say the majority of people these days would say yes to that. What they found was only related to increased risk of dying if you said yes to that second question as well. And what it's actually suggesting is that it's not stress, but your beliefs about stress that is bad for your health. In fact, the researchers went on to demonstrate that actually, if you looked at the main causes of death in America, here are the top 15, stress beliefs actually contributed to 20,000 deaths every year, in the United States, a greater number of deaths than HIV, than homicide, and than skin cancer. So this is really serious stuff. The beliefs that you hold impact on your longevity and on your health. Here's why. We know some of the physiological responses to stress. What happens within your body as well is that during times of fight or flight, it constricts your blood vessels in the way that we can see here. So your heart's pumping, but extra pressure's put on the heart because your body's making it harder because of the constricted blood vessels to pump that blood through, and that puts pressure on and it can lead to things like cardiovascular disease. Interestingly, in the people who said that they didn't believe that stress was bad for them, all the stress responses occurred. So the beating heart, the blood going to muscles, the increase even in cortisol, which can be a good thing because it can sharpen your mind and your mental agility. But the difference is there wasn't the constriction of blood vessels. And that protects them from some of the toxic elements of stress. And what's been found is the profile of people who believe that stress isn't bad for them, the physiological profile mirrors exactly what happens to us during moments of joy and moments of courage. So during moments of joy and moments of courage, our heart rate goes up, you start to maybe perspire a little bit more, cortisol hits your system, but you're also telling yourself, hopefully, you're looking forward to this, you're enjoying it, this could be a positive opportunity. And what happened, the difference is your blood vessels remain relaxed. Bringing it back, though, to the sort of work-based situation, is there any evidence that it's going to help performance? A lot of the initial evidence comes from schools and school children. And what one of the studies did, and this was by Carol Dweck and Lisa Blackwell, they asked a number of questions to identify whether children were more of a growth mindset or more of a fixed mindset. And then they tracked their performance in the same lessons with the same teachers and watched what happened over the space of 4 terms. And you can see here, there seems to be, a variation that's getting greater in terms of the results and their maths performance. Now, that's fine if you've got an accurate way of identifying whether you or the people that work for you have got a growth or a fixed mindset. Can you actually influence this, though? Can you make a difference? What a difference study did was they looked at equal ability children, and they hadn't differentiated whether or not they appeared to be more fixed or growth mindset, but they gave subtly different forms of feedback to different people. To some of the kids, they said, wow, that's a really great score. You must be really good at this. Now that in itself is fixed mindset praise. because you're reinforcing some talent or ability that that person thinks they've already got. Does that make sense? You must be great at this. The other kids were also praised, but the subtlest of differences took place. The feedback said, wow, that's a great score. You must have worked really hard at this. So you're actually praising effort and not ability. All the evidence says that encouraging people to put in more effort will deliver better results. On that same study, what the children were given were puzzles, and they were given the praise, as you know, in two different ways. But then they were also asked to do the puzzle again. People with the fixed mindset praise did worse by 20% when they did the puzzle again, because they think, I'm already good at this. I know I'm good at this. I've been told I'm good at this. People who were praised based on their efforts when they did the puzzles again increased their performance by 30%. And these are the same children that are all in the same class the day before and the day before that, all at the same level of ability. And yet that is a 50% increase in performance overall between the two groups. That is staggering. Imagine if you could even just bring about a 5% improvement in the people that work for you, just by the way that they're praised, by the way they're being given feedback. What was also interesting was researchers asked the children themselves to report how well they'd done. Fixed mindset praise led to the students being 3 times more likely to lie about the results that they'd got, because they don't want to look bad.
Yeah,
they're embarrassed about it. They already know they've been told they're good at this, so discover they're not. What happens is, instead of it being regarded as an opportunity to learn, to grow and to develop and to learn why, they take the shortcuts and they're more inclined to lie. And even brain scans demonstrate that there appear to be differences in terms of parts of the brain getting activated when they're receiving praise. So people with a fixed mindset, the brain becomes most active when receiving information about how the person themselves has performed, i.e. they've done well or not. They focus on how they're being judged. With a growth mindset, the brain becomes most active when receiving information about what they could do to improve, what they could do better next time, i.e. the focus is on what they have learned. So implications for managers to consider how you go about praising people, and whether or not it is for being skilled, for being smart, for being talented at things. All the evidence, and it's evidence, I'm going to give you some evidence in business as well shortly, but all the evidence says that unknowingly promotes more of a fixed mindset at work, and if anything will contribute to people losing confidence when things are tough. And a growth mindset and growth mindset feedback encourages more of an openness to feedback, greater receptivity to it, and it primes people as well to actually want to learn from mistakes and things that have happened that they can grow from. In terms of encouraging a growth mindset, my advice would be to provide effective feedback, fully describe the approach you want to reinforce, praise effort, persistence, and progress. They're the currencies that you really want to be introducing. Embrace mistakes as learning opportunities. I mean, they still need to be addressed and revised, but it's as a learning opportunity rather than an issue or problem. Reinforce potential can and does develop, and the mindset can evolve through experience. And actually, even the brain is malleable. It can also adapt. This concept is called neuroplasticity. The brain doesn't just diminish as we get old. You can continue to make new neural pathways at any age. So get people to reflect themselves on the process, and learning from the journey made, not just the final results, is also really helpful. And the one key thing I would always say, never say, you're really good at this. Managing performance then. Some of the hints and tips might be around applying the OGSM model, maybe, but instead of SMART, something like an AMS objectives, so much punchier and action-orientated objectives in order to stretch people, challenge them a little bit, because that is good for people. Introduce, when we can, and I think there's some massive opportunities here, regular in-the-moment coaching conversations. So it's got to be someone that's informed, it's got to be someone that's, you know, knows their stuff, but this is one of the quickest ways that you can learn and grow. Whenever possible, don't compare people's performance to other individuals in the same group. Compare performance when it's operationally viable to their own performance, to their historic performance, and measure growth. Gap, as an organization, you know, the clothes retailer, who were really struggling a few years ago, have introduced a model called Growth for All, based on growth mindset principles. And one of the initiatives is that they've done away with all of the comparative performance ratings, and they now only compare performance of their staff on a performance to performance basis by each individual. Support others to recognize their own self-talk. This can be quite challenging, and I would suggest do this in a very gentle way. But when people say, oh, I'm not very good at that, or I'm hopeless at that, or gently maybe challenge that, and when you hear it yourself as well, do the same. And learn about deliberate practice. And deliberate practice really says that, you know, that talent is not enough. For years and years and years, businesses have said, you know, it's all about talent. We have talent management programs. Well, Google has stopped looking for the most talented individuals. They look for people, in terms of their succession planning, the greatest capacity to grow, and not the biggest levels of innate talent. And all in all, it's about generating this appetite for learning. Now, in terms of philosophical ways of looking at it, I'd say this slide, which is something I've used before on coaching, really sums it up nicely. As developing people isn't what people commonly think. And that is that it's about transforming, you changing someone who's in it from ineffective to, you know, this super high flyer. My experience says that doesn't happen. Developing performance is far more subtle and more incremental. And I think sometimes it's only about 1 degree at a time. 211 degrees Fahrenheit, water is just very, very hot. Yet 1 degree further on, at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, water boils, and boiling water creates steam, and steam is enough to transform locomotive like this. And actually, once you think of just small, you know, minor improvements, you know, it becomes quite liberating for people, and they're not as intimidated as looking for these big transformations. Now, I've mentioned before that you have to have a culture that will support you for you to be able to bring the biggest benefits and biggest gains. I'm going to ask you to think about, where are you now, and really be honest with this. If you click on the polls button, and actually if we go to the second poll, organizational culture, because the evidence is, can't create this culture if there is a singular obsession with numbers and results. And what I'm not saying there is the results don't count, because Christ, obviously they do, but you're much more likely to get the results and deliver superior results with the right approaches. And I think that's what this is about. And things like blame culture and fear will all compromise that. And there was a fantastic example of Enron, the American energy giants. I don't know if anyone remembers Enron, but they went bankrupt in 2001. When they went in to sort of find out why, and how could such a successful company have failed so dramatically, It was attributed to the fact that they were so results orientated that employees were scared to admit their mistakes. And so what they did was everything we've already heard about today. They covered up issues and problems because they thought they would be blamed if these things were shared. Conversely, and it is a journey, employees in a growth mindset, and this is from the Harvard Business Review, 47% more likely to say their colleagues are trustworthy. You know, you're creating and strengthening a culture of trust. If there's not constantly who's to blame, 34% more likely to feel a strong sense of ownership and commitment to the company. More likely to say that the company supports considered risk-taking, hence the questions around these subjects. And 49% more likely to say that the company actively fosters new ideas and innovation. Forget, ready, aim, fire, which is such a British philosophy. It's a cautious and it's a careful philosophy. Ready, aim, fire. You must have heard of that. Yeah. Get ready, you aim, and then you fire. And then, you know, hopefully if you've gone through all of those steps, the focus is on that you hit the bullseye. In American organizations and organizations that are committed to continual improvements, their philosophy is kind of the other way around. And it's a ready, fire, aim. So not RAF, it's RFA. It's saying don't get mesmerized by trying to be perfect. Don't get mesmerized at the aiming bit that got to be 100 because, you know, I'm worried that I'm going to get blamed, or I'm worried I'm going to be exposed. I'm worried that I'm going to be judged. Forget all of that. Just get it right. So get ready, absolutely. Put the planning and preparation in a professional way, but then fire it. Because if you do it in this way, in terms of an ongoing cyclical process, when you fire, even if you don't hit the bullseye, you've done the best job that you can. And if you're 1.5 inches away from the bullseye on that first intervention, guess what you now know? You've got to find a way of getting it 1.5 inches further over on the right-hand side. You've got to create those feedback channels and make those easy and fluent, so it's constantly moving and constantly improving. RFA, not RAF. And if you get everyone thinking like that, it builds that sort of momentum and enthusiasm for getting it right. What are the implications for organizations then? Well, culturally, as we've hinted at, you have to encourage people to ask for feedback on their own performance and their own learning. And if you're worried that feedback is bad or feedback means criticism, you're not likely to do that. So it's got to become an everyday currency. It's got to become something that's just a way of working. Reward individuals for team contributions. Always remember to also do that. So focus on we rather than just I. And actually that's quite important, because people can become a bit singular. If their performance is head to where they used to be, they might become a little bit myopic. Avoid the blame game, create psychologically safe environments. Make sure, and this is what we're going to do 2 weeks' time, make sure individuals feel comfortable trying out new things, sharing information, and this way, you know, nurture a culture and an environment that tolerates informed risk-taking, considered risk-taking. Now, I think conceptually, this kind of sums it up as well. What I'd like you to do, count up how many triangles can you see, and just write that down, please. Okay, a little thumbs up when you've got the magic number. How many did you get?
14.
I got 8.
8.
I got 11.
I got 11.
11. Okay. And just forget the image for a minute. Imagine I am from Mars. I don't know any of your symbols, And you are now going to explain to me what a triangle is.
It's an object with three sides that all meet.
An object with three sides that all meet. Now, based on your definition, how many triangles can you see?
Well, now you say that, I probably agree with Andy.
Absolutely. This slide, more than any other, I would say, sums up your job, because what your role is really about is doing what we've just done. Your role is defining the boundaries, which Stuart's just done. And then, as long as you've got capable, competent people and you've appointed the right people in the right role, it's to give them the freedom to get on with it within the boundaries that you've established. That encourages a culture of trust. And you look at companies who do things like this. Netflix, who believe too many rules, policies, regulation, stipulations are innovation killers. People do their best work, when you leave them to define the boundaries, but then you leave them to sort of bounce between them and come up with ideas. It's no surprise Netflix recently offered $1 million to any team that could improve their movie recommendation service. I'll tell you what, boy, have you got some engaged teams when you throw that on the table. Netflix also don't have a holiday policy. If you want a day off, you get your amount that you get paid for, but if you want a day off, take it. But everything's going to be going on while you're away. If you don't want to be part of it, that's entirely up to you. But they get fantastic results on employee surveys. Similarly, in terms of building trust, don't overcomplicate things. Sometimes making things complicated for the sake of it emotionally pushes people away. What a trusting organization says instead, and this was an example at General Motors, who had a prescriptive 10-page what the dress code should be. The new CEO came in, just ripped it up and replaced it with 2 words, which said, dress appropriately. So if you're a salesperson and you're going out on behalf of General Motors, you're going to need a suit. That's appropriate. If you're a production worker, you're going to need safety overalls. But it says to people, you're trusted. You've got a mind. You've got the wisdom to know and interpret that correctly. You have to have trust really in the people and send out that message to be able to encourage them to take risks, to be able to encourage them not to be concerned that they're going to get blamed if things go wrong, and so on and so forth. Just pulling this together then, this is Carol Dweck, focusing on intelligence and ability, not as effective as looking for people who love challenges, want to grow and want to collaborate. So where it begins is obviously recruitment. So look for some of these things or display some of these things if you're in an interview, because they will take you further. And I've already mentioned that Google do this, and Google have recently started to hire people who lack college degrees but prove that they are capable, independent learners. I've mentioned about GAP, their Growth for All initiative, and managers are actively encouraged to compare performance, people to their past performance, not to others. Staff are encouraged to identify challenging goals for themselves. This is about encouraging ownership again. And succession planning is built around those who've got the most capacity to grow, not the people that are the most skilled or the most talented. In Microsoft, performance is now based on how much managers help others to succeed. And Nadella has employed a growth mindset, has introduced it to the organization to change it from the old Bill Gates approaches. And in doing so, and this is very recent, he's moved it from a $300 million company to a $1 trillion company. So significant commercial benefits of getting this right. Final thing I will say is just remember this as well. You don't need to be an expert to succeed at something. It was professionals that built the Titanic, but it was amateurs that built the Ark. Yeah, so never ever let any lack of experience hold you back from going ahead and getting involved with something. If you wanted more information on this, I would say Carol Dweck's book is a brilliant place to start at, and a really interesting read. However, given that growth mindset really appeals to managers and people that want to be challenged and want to be stretched, I might be better off giving you 3 book recommendations. So have a look at Carol Dweck's. Mark Manson's is a really interesting book, and I would say potentially could be really useful for you, because Mark Manson writes about for not letting others affect your state of mind. Finally, if you are more strategic and interested in just how Nadella made such a massive transformation and changed what were originally very competitive teams at Microsoft, who were almost like warring factions, into collaborative work groups, why not read Hit Refresh? Any questions?
I think as definitely as part of this, Chris, I've just made the notes of those books. We'll get a load of those purchased for the team, so we'll probably circulate them through so everyone's got access to them at some point. Because I think definitely, I think reading is it's part of that, as we discussed, isn't it? It's part of that learning. So it's that constant learning. So we've purchased some books on other things as well, but we'll definitely be buying those as well, definitely, because the commitment from the business is there.
I'm really mindful, on a webinar type of experience, there's a limit to what we can achieve, but hopefully I've given you some insight in terms of the potential advantages. I think the way forward is definitely to try to physically and practically try and apply some of these things. And that's what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks' time. And I'm going to give you I'll get a smorgasbord of different tools and techniques, and they will help you to transform your thinking and build your confidence in your own ability to come up with a whole host of innovative suggestions and ideas for any problem that's given to you to move your team, your department, or even the organization a little bit further forward.
Yeah, brilliant.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Nice one.
Okay, have a good afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Great.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers, Chris.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.